All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Donna Riley. I'm the head of the School of Engineering Education. Thanks for your introduction, Ed. The topic today is taking stock, appreciating the state of the School of Engineering Education. And in the year that we've had, which is really an 18-month-long year, I think this is really a good moment to think about where we've come, where we are now, and where we're headed next. And that's what taking stock is all about. So one of the places that we've been, of course, is in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how our school has guided itself using our core values through this pandemic, and a great number of transitions that we've had over the last 18 months, including a lot of things that we have to celebrate. Without painting a false rosy picture, I also will be honest and unvarnished in what that has taken of us. And I will talk about where those wins have been in our first year program, our grad program, and in multidisciplinary engineering and interdisciplinary engineering studies, and then draw some lessons looking forward. So we are a unit that is comprised of 3 synergistic activities that are all multidisciplinary in nature. We have a first-year engineering program where the goal is to advise, prepare, and retain students for engineering degrees. We have a multi- and interdisciplinary set of BS programs where we incubate new disciplines and enable students to find unique paths into engineering. And we have engineering education graduate programs, no longer just the PhD program. We also have an online master's and a certificate program. And in those programs, we use our research to enhance our engineering education system. So our vision is a more inclusive and socially connected and scholarly engineering education that can transform the practice of engineering education based on our scholarship and research. So along about February of 2020, the E&E executive team was talking about what to do in a pandemic. And Dean Fentiman, having been in the dean's office for some years, had on paper a pandemic plan that dated back to the bird flu, I believe, the H1N1, and we dusted that off and thought through different possibilities. And this was before the college or university was really thinking about what we might need to do. And along about March 6th, Indiana had its first case. And 2 days later, we made the decision to move first-year engineering online, starting right after spring break. And we did that based on the history of knowing what the flu does in those classrooms over there, being as dense as they are. And so we made that decision, and there was a nail-biting 48 hours or less, maybe 24 hours, where parents started to call me and say, "What, are you kidding me? Going online?" And then thankfully Mitch Daniels made the call just about 24 hours after that. And Teresa and I were busily writing some sort of press statement defending what we had just done when they declared it for the whole university. So that was great, but then we went ahead to say, well, what's MDE going to do? And what are our grad programs going to do? And we transitioned to being online. And staff also had to think about how are we going to telework in a culture that had not really done a lot of telework at all before. And then by March 23rd, Governor Holcomb had already issued a stay-at-home order, so we had no choice in the matter at that point. So everybody that didn't have reliable internet at that point had to figure out what was next. And we had a lot of successes in anticipating what students were going to need in particular. We knew some of our first-year students were going to need access to laptops, for example, and we tried to get those in as many hands as we could before they left campus. So we had the sense, and I have to credit Teresa with this sense because she's always positive, and she's the one that said, look, we got this. We've been doing experiments in online ed, right? We know how to educate students here. We got this. And so we made a short video that said, we got this. We're going to move the courses online. We know how to put students first, no matter what. And we were experiencing the what. And it resonated a lot with the brand that Purdue had just rolled out, which was about the persistent pursuit of the next giant leap. And it sure felt like we were making a giant leap. So that's basically kind of where we were. And then thinking about our priorities, which is generally, in my role, that's something I spend a lot of time doing. What are our priorities for this year? What are our priorities for next year? Well, I used our strategic compass to guide us. And the number one item in our strategic compass is empowering our people. And so in a pandemic, that looks like making sure people are safe and making sure that our people are doing as well as can be possible in a pandemic. So we prioritized those two things. Not that we did it perfectly, right? But those were the things that we were constantly focused on, driving everything that we did. And then secondly, we have setting the pace in innovative programs. And so that meant putting our students first and living our commitment that learning is relational. And so whether we were doing that online or whether we were doing that with masks and face shields 6 feet apart, we knew that we needed to keep those relationships happening. And we had to keep our focus on the quality of the student experience and our research driving our decisions. And we wanted to continue to ask the big questions and realize new ways of being engineering and forming engineers, even in a pandemic environment. And we wanted to maintain our external leadership. And we found opportunities to do that amid the pandemic because we were able to say, we know some things about active learning. You are now shifting to learning online. Here's some tips for how you might think about active learning. And so some faculty who hadn't revisited their classroom practice in a while had a chance to think about active learning. And we continue to communicate our impact and identify opportunities to continue to grow, whether that's in our educational programs or in our research. So one of the things that happened when we went out in March, one of my goals was to not lose any of us. And unfortunately, we did lose Dr. Bob, who was a former faculty member. He had served in E&E. He was the first, I believe, faculty member hired into freshman engineering specifically. And he worked with first-year students, and he worked with honors students, and he believed in putting students first no matter what. That was his mantra. He said it all the time. It's how we remember him. And so in celebrating his life and remembering him, it was a really important touchstone for us to remember to put students first no matter what. And then a little later, we lost George Bodner, who was transformational in founding E&E. He worked with Kamyar Haghighi, and he generously mentored the new faculty that came in those early years. And he served on numerous students' committees. And it was an incredible thing to attend his Zoom memorial service, where I got to hear some of his students reflect on what their relationship with George meant to them. And he was always there to talk about the deep stuff. He was there to talk about what really matters. And so it was, again, a way to remember who we are, because it's in these kinds of adversity that's when we really remember and see who we are. So one of the other things that I think is really important for us to celebrate is the promotion of our faculty. And this is something that when you think about the strategy in the big picture of why we have a department that's dedicated to engineering education in a university like Purdue, that one of the goals, let's just take a minute and applaud the advancement of our faculty. Uh-oh. Okay. Oh, and then we also had, I'm going to skip ahead and say that we also had to say goodbye to a lot of people. So in saying goodbye to Bob Montgomery, saying goodbye to George Bodner, we also said goodbye to a lot of folks who retired, moved on to other positions, and we missed them all terribly. And we got a chance, thankfully, to see some of them face-to-face at our picnic last week. But we missed these folks, and they're all still a part of us, even as we welcome new people as well. Many of you are in the room, and I'm sorry that Katie, I had added your picture, and it was in the version I had this morning, and it's not here now, but Katie joined us too. And we have more searches. We have searches for more staff and new faculty at the assistant professor, the full professor level, and another professor of practice. So really excited about being able to do those searches to continue to grow our family in E&E. But welcome to all the new folks and folks that are in new roles. Some of these faces are familiar to you already. We also have been able to advance a number of projects and initiatives. And I say this because I think in pandemic mode, we don't even necessarily take the time to take stock in this, right? All this stuff has happened. We launched a fusion studio for entertainment and engineering, and it went live in the middle of 2020, at a time when the entertainment industry, by the way, was lights out, right? And so and what Mary and Rich Dione in the College of Liberal Arts have been doing is steadily building a place, right, that exists virtually and will exist physically, that serves our students who are exploring entertainment and engineering, but also leads the nation in connecting entertainment engineering and industry, and being the first accredited engineering program that offered a track and theater engineering. We're able to lead other academic institutions who are exploring this intersection of entertainment and engineering. We've got major research centers that went live during the pandemic. We have Ed's research. Ed is involved in the workforce development part of AMPM, which is about energetic materials. Sorry, that's a big acronym. And I'm the engineering workforce development for the Aspire ERC, and we join a couple of other large research centers. Dean is involved in one in manufacturing. Allison, if she's not here, is involved in the C-STAR ERC. And so we've been able to add our workforce development strength and grow it in the middle of this pandemic. And then we were able to launch, or to transfer, I should say, the National Institute for Engineering Ethics, which is now housed in the School of Engineering Education at Purdue University. And that's a really exciting thing. And Brent Jessic is the new director of that National Institute. And I believe that we can speak to the nation on matters of engineering ethics. That's super exciting. And I didn't want it to go unnoticed just because there's a pandemic. And then there's a number of grants that our faculty have received. Carrie's is a representative one, but I wanted to mention it because it was a rapid grant. And rapid awards are usually given in a time of like national disaster. So when there's a big oil spill, right? Scientists, NSF gives scientists awards to go see what the impact of that oil spill was. Go take data real soon and get back to us right away. And Carrie, in collaboration with Julie Martin at Ohio State, got a grant to look at the engineering education impacts of COVID. And so that's a super exciting way that our research, by being ready, right, by Carrie's work on assessment, knowing how to assess work, knowing how to assess online work in particular, she was ready to go and responded rapidly to the call to really study what's happening right now and where do we go next. And then, of course, there was another pandemic that was going on all along around racism, and the murder of George Floyd really kind of brought a renewed attention to racism, and we were challenged in E&E to renew our own commitment to anti-racism. And so we did that, and we brought in, despite the pandemic, we virtually brought in 2 consultants to work with us on white accountability and to work with students of color, and to really start to plan strategically what we need to do as a school. And so I want to say that builds on work that had been going on before 2020, right? So prior to 2020, we could talk about a lot of research that was going on. There's a number of faculty who had been involved in research on equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice. Our own E&E GSA had a social justice chair that had begun just a few years ago to really focus attention on change and on anti-racism work. We had begun to change our policies for how we do the change of degree option when students come into FYE from within Purdue. And we had been, for many years, enhancing our curricula across first year MDE, the PhD program, with a lot of different research, informed by research, using inclusive pedagogical practices, thinking about equity concerns. And we were able to, even through the pandemic transition, think about the equity concerns for our students and how we could address those in being there for our students. And so that's kind of where we were before. And we started with a letter of action and making that anti-racism commitment as a school. And we had folks showing up at Black Lives Matter protests, right? Members of our school were there and participating in local protests and some other ones around the country. We were listening to staff, students, and faculty, both within the school and in our NSBE chapter locally. We saw national calls to action from blackandengineering.org, and we listened to a local call from the mother chapter of NSBE here at Purdue of things that could change within our college. And we had those white accountability groups. We had an effort to document the state of the climate in the school. And the ENEGSA scheduled a number of critical conversations that folks attended throughout last year. And then that culminated in the development of a strategic plan for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion that our faculty have adopted. And there are a number of actions that we're going to take in the 21-22 year. And that includes things that happen at the macro level, at the meso level, and at the micro level. So we're talking about baking in equity into the structures of the workings of the school, right? That's sort of the macro level, thinking about our reward systems, thinking about accountability and reporting. Then thinking at the meso level, how do we skill our people up in E&E? And then thinking about, how do we monitor and improve climate? And then at the micro level, thinking about things like syllabus policies, what we do in classrooms, thinking about how we do recruitment and retention, all those kinds of things at the micro level. And so for the 21-22 year, we're going to be institutionalizing those structures. That's like year one, is setting up the structure so that it becomes sustainable and something that we can repeat year over year. Second, we're going to be skilling up people and growing our capacity to dismantle institutional oppression and dynamics of privilege and marginalization. So that's the overarching goals for 21-22. Action items include aligning the school leadership so that we can foster, coordinate, and monitor our efforts, which includes an inventory of our assets. So what can we bring to this anti-racism work as a school? And what are our capacities? And then how do we grow those? And then how do we best foster, coordinate, and monitor all of those things? So that's a structural and strategic question. And then secondly, how do we grow our capacity? And that includes work on curriculum and pedagogy, thinking about faculty development and also our grad student development across all of our programs in the school. And then finally, we have a number of searches. So this is a great opportunity for us to make sure that we are employing all best practices that we can and thinking about ways that we can innovate in this year. And we know we've got some spaces in both faculty and staff hiring and then also in our grad recruitment. So we're excited about all of those things for this coming year. So I want to celebrate some wins in the first year engineering space. So as I said before, the mission is to advise, prepare, and retain students. And FYE's been recognized by the university for exceptional teaching and instructional support during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to start with advising, because the advising team has done some truly extraordinary things. So for the first part, they managed to move their entire operation online. And when you see the thing happen in real space, right, we've got a waiting room, we've got tons of students that come in, and we've got a hall of offices where students are checked in by Carlene, and they go and meet with their advisor. And there's a complicated system because of the large number of students that our emphasis on quality and student satisfaction is impeccably high. We've had a just incredible record of students reporting 96, 97, 98% satisfaction with their advising appointments and experience. And we had the challenge of moving that all online at a moment's notice. And we did that, and using Microsoft Teams, you could jump on at any time of the day and find an advisor and get an appointment and see that person. And that was true not just for regular advising periods, but both summer 2020 and summer 2021 saw virtual advising. So the whole experience that's called STAR, which is when students normally come to campus and meet with their advisors, and this is a hectic time, to say the least, for our advising team. Imagine doing this all online where you've got students that are everywhere in the world, and advisors are pushing and meeting at times convenient to the student, serving students at all hours. And it truly was Herculean, and then to do it all over again in 2021 with more students. We got 3,200 first-year students, we think. We get the census next week. We'll know the true number. But you advise them even if they melt sometimes, right? So the melt, the melt is a tricky thing. So anyway, this is all about our advising team stepped up in a huge way. And so it's also the case that we had the same experience of folks stepping up all through the instructional side of first-year engineering. So some of the things that happened there were we had to think about basically two different things. One was how to maintain instructional quality going online, and how do we do things like prepare our tests against cheating, right? So one of the things that had been kind of this imperfect solution for many, many years was we had to do our tests for Engineering 132 in Elliott Hall. And for years we had tried to find a way around that. Well, when the pandemic happened and we had to be online, there was suddenly an opportunity to figure this out. But we had to cheat-proof those tests. And so, and it's Ann, is Ann here? My understanding is that Ann spearheaded this effort, but the whole IST gets credit, and Tamara Moore and the 132 curators, they moved this thing online and freed us from Elliott Hall. And that is a huge win for us and for students. So yay. And we needed to figure out how to do active learning, how to do teaming. And this was really, before everybody was familiar with Zoom, we had enough people here that knew that Zoom was the way to go, right? And said, no, we have to do Zoom because we have to do breakouts, because we have to have students teaming, they have to be interactive. And we got that done in spring of 2020. And then we got feedback and we learned how to do better, right? And we knew that we needed to be there for students socially. So the next thing that we knew was, first of all, in spring 2020, we had a lot of distressed students, and we had a lot of faculty and TAs and really everybody, the advising team as well, reaching out to students, being there with students, because the students were reaching for whoever they could get, right? And we were there for them. And we needed to learn, well, what are we going to do in 2021 when we got brand new students who've never been to campus before? And they need to learn how to be attached to each other, to their advisor, to their faculty members, to Purdue as a whole. They need to find a sense of community. And so we tried all kinds of things, online and in person. And one of my favorite things about this was that, unbeknownst to us, Tamara Moore, is she here?
No, she's online.
Tamara's online, but Tamara Moore is a Zumba instructor. And one of the awesome things was she got to really shine in this role where she was doing Zumba both online and in person so that students could get moving. And it really gave students a chance to meet each other in a casual environment if they were here on campus, but also to do something that wasn't just studying, right, with each other. And we had gather town events so students could meet each other and form study groups. We had the students themselves built a Discord server that went up so that they could collaborate on other stuff. And we just did everything we could think of to give them an opportunity to be connected. So so the students told us things like, I really like how even though the class is entirely remote, I still felt connected to the teaching team and to my team. There was never a time I couldn't reach out for help. I knew how much you cared about my success. And they said the way this taught was class should be a model for other classes. And it emphasized actual learning. right? So students saw high learning value in what we do. And a student who was international, who was entirely online, said, it helped me feel more connected, and everyone felt comfortable with each other. And so we really did find a way, right? Did we reach every student? No. But we did find a way so that students felt more connected. And one of the really wonderful things about this summer was we did get to have our students back across the hall here and welcome them back. And I know that our instructors who taught this summer were super emotional about that sort of reunion. And we were so pleased to have you all back. And so I want to recognize 4 of our students who came for early start and came back into that classroom and were part of that celebration for us. And so I want to recognize Merrick, Blake, Lila, and Reedy, who are all here in the front row. Thank you all. And we're just so pleased to have you back, right? And so welcome. And what you all did, as I understand, was you worked on with our TI microcontroller kits on your team project. And that's something that, you know, we really, I think, missed, right? Was that ability to have you all in the classroom working together, hands-on. And I understand that, you know, one of the things that we see when folks work in teams is that people come in with different levels of experience with equipment, and some of you had more experience and some of you had less, and you were able to teach each other and learn from each other. And that's really one of the things that we celebrate about our first-year engineering experience and what it means to be part of a team. So thank you all thanks for being here in particular. So I'm going to talk a little bit about MDE and IDES, because one of the things that happened when first year went online was that it freed up the space across the hall so that MDE and IDES could safely get together. And under social distancing rules, that was the one space they could be. And so they were able to have a safe, active learning face-to-face experience for our sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And they received the 2021 School Award for Exceptional Teaching and Instructional Support during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the things that really stood out about what they were able to do was, first of all, they created a common culture of safety. So they maintained active learning protocols, and instructors were doing really 3 different learning modalities. It was a flipped classroom, it was hybrid, it was all the modalities to support a diverse learning community in MDE and IDES, and it included modeling safe behavior and having a confidence that students could learn and still have the sort of the full experience, despite the sometimes intense safety protocols, and despite the fact that there were unexpected things that happened too. So this happened on the first day of class. There was a blackout. And so even as you think you've planned for every COVID eventuality, and then something else happens, right? And the way in which the students in particular in MDE and IDS were learning how to roll with it, learning flexibility, learning adaptability, all through this. And so, you know, I mentioned that that Broadway's lights went out. And so with the Fusion Studio, again, it was all about doing what we needed to do. And so there was an online symposium for the Fusion Studio. And we're gearing up to do face-to-face in Orlando with a huge number of folks. There's going to be a big kind of national face-to-face debut of the Fusion Studio in Florida in November, which I'm really excited about. But we were able to co-host with UNLV the virtual Symposium for Entertainment and Engineering in 2020. I want to celebrate just a couple of our MDE and IDS alumni for whom the pandemic, I think, created opportunities. So in the first case, I'm going to tell a story of Madeline, who had an interest in food systems and food security. And she was able to find a job that uniquely fit her passion, which was working at the food bank in Texas. And they recruited her in the middle of the pandemic because they had unprecedented demand to distribute food to hungry folks in the pandemic. But they also had lost one of their key things, which was volunteers who could go distribute that food and help sort it and everything. And so Madeline was able to take her engineering skills and figure out the logistics of how can they get in there and take care of people in the middle of this pandemic when hungry people need food and their old system isn't something that can be used. And so she was quickly praised and promoted because she was able to bring so much ingenuity to that problem and really find her passion. Secondly, I want to celebrate Abby Mishra, who was an IDES student who became a med student at IU. And one of the things that she got to do as an IU med student was vaccinate folks very early in the pandemic. So it was right when Pfizer was rolling out. She was able to vaccinate healthcare workers, and just so happens that her mom is a healthcare worker. So she had the great honor to be able to vaccinate her mom, which is a pretty wonderful thing to be able to do as part of pandemic response. And we've got some other alumni and alumni, I should say, who are doing other things that are non-pandemic related, right? We've got diversity, equity, and inclusion engineering. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion engineering student. And we have a student who's working on renewable energy. And we have and climate solutions, right? We have a student working on global security engineering. And so for all of these sort of emerging, really complex problems in engineering, MDE and IDS are launching students who are able to really bring a new and fresh set of engineering skills to those problems. Then I want to talk about our grad programs, right? So we've got, first of all, online programs. In the middle of the pandemic, we rolled out an online master's degree. It got approved by the state, and we can celebrate that. And we've now got new grad students who are taking advantage of that. And so welcome to our new students in those programs. And we also have an online grad certificate, which had been in its early stages, but really came into its own in the pandemic because that online modality, so many more people have become comfortable with it, that we really think we can serve a greater number of people than we could before. And it's that kind of planning and foresight that really did enable us to make those transitions that we had to make to online learning throughout the pandemic. And so I want to welcome our new cohort, which is one of our biggest ever. And so despite, yay, welcome. And so despite, you know, all of the growth, right, that we've seen, there's a lot of, when I talk to other heads and other engineering programs, I talk to deans, there's this wrangling of like, oh, there's so many engineering ed programs now, is that okay? And I say, yes, we're fine. There's plenty of room for growth. We're a new field. We're gonna see growth. That's good, right? And the proof is here. We've got a very healthy incoming class, and so welcome to you all. And I also want to extend a special welcome to the students who came in 2020, right? Because they came, because you came in a totally online setting. And for many of you, these sort of first days of first weeks are your first face-to-face introduction. So welcome. So all of this then leads me to say one other thing that's a win and a strength for us, which is our honesty. And I want to say that, you know, throughout all of this, I'm celebrating all these things, right? And I also know that I'm looking at a bunch of exhausted people as I talk about this, right? I know what it took for us to do these things that we've done. And it all came at a cost. So some people are burned out. Some people are grieving. Some people are anxious. Some people are depressed, right? So some of us are just not feeling okay. And we've had periods of feeling not okay. Some of us don't feel okay right now. There's a lot to still be stressed out about, right? And so I want to acknowledge that because I think that this is a community where we can acknowledge that. And we can say this is who we are. And we can be there with each other through that. And I think that is absolutely unique to us. And it's the key to what it takes to go through something like we've been through in the last 18 months. It's that ability to be there with each other honestly and to bring our whole selves to that work, even parts of ourselves that might not be feeling very good, right? So I just wanted to name that and appreciate it and bring that into the conversation. Because I think that that's how we've learned viscerally the importance of our work, right? Because we can celebrate all these wins and how, you know, we've made great strides in this goal of revolutionizing engineering education, engineering formation, workforce development, and done that all based on our research. And it is true that these problems, the dual pandemics of systemic racism, COVID-19, are two examples of the kinds of problems that we as a society are facing now and in the future, right? These are problems that are highly uncertain, they're complex, people have ideological disagreements, people sometimes can't agree on what the facts are, right? And we get in these very charged debates about them. And that's also true of climate change. And whether we're having this conversation yet or it's coming, I saw ASEE's having a summit on Industry 4.0 next week. That Industry 4.0 conversation, what's happening with AI, what's happening with automation, it's going to be just as charged. There's going to be just as much debate. And so we can be ready for that if we know we need to bring ourselves, our whole selves to the work. We need to understand the problems holistically. And we've learned that we can do this together, right? And that we can use our moral imaginations to dream how things could be otherwise. And I think that that is maybe our greatest strength. And I will leave it at that for questions. And I want to say thank you, but thank each other. Do that for me, if you will.
We have this microphone that we can pass around, or I can run around to people so that the folks on the live stream can hear your questions. So if you have questions, raise your hand and I will meet you with the mic.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Donna, you've done it. That's it. There are no questions. Someone must have a question that's really more of a comment, at least, right? No. Donna, I have a question.
Sure.
I like what you said at the end, and extending grace to people as they are continuing to experience all of the highs and lows and stress and joys, perhaps. It is only the first week, right? Yeah. And ostensibly, the beginning of the semester, people are sort of cheerful and happy about things, and it's gonna become more challenging from here. Yeah. Do you have advice or wisdom gleaned from the last 18 months about ways we can keep our morale up because things are going to get a bit harder as we go into the darker days and the colder days and the longer parts of the semester?
Sure. I mean, I would say know that you're not alone, right? And we are a community. I think that's the thing that I've been most grateful for is, there's no group of people I'd rather go through a pandemic with, right? like really, it's, I mean, this department has had that flexibility, that grace, that, I mean, we communicated so well going into that pandemic that it was possible for a long time to kind of keep going with the sort of disrupted communications that we did have. There came a time when we really needed to be face to face again, I would say, to just kind of close the loop on certain things because it gets awkward, right? But that closeness is really important, and that trust, right, is really important. So I would lean on each other, right? Know that you're not alone, and to just reach out. We've got there's a community Slack. You all probably know about this thing. I go in and out of it, but it's there for us, right? And I would say, the other thing I would say is that I think for all these things that are on the done list, and we got so much to celebrate here. I mean, was anybody surprised? Like, wow, we got all that done? Because it feels like we didn't get anything done, right? Or someone's going, yeah, but what about all this other stuff we didn't do, right? And that Jedi strategic plan, that has a lot of stuff that's undone on it, right? and it's urgent, right? It's not like it's not important. So it's that how do you deal with that stack and this stack at the same time? And I think it really is a matter of don't ignore the stack, but don't beat yourself up about this stack, right? Do what you can and really think, step back, take stock, Think about what have you done, what can you do, and do that thing, right? And know that you're not alone. You don't have to do it all yourself.
Well, I think I feel the same thing in talking to our students and everybody here. We're all thankful to be back in person, and I think we missed seeing everybody here. We made giant leaps switching to an online system, which was phenomenal. We're happy to kind of come back here, trying to return back a little bit to the way we did things before. But then my question begs, we made some giant leaps in some areas, especially with instructional modality. And where is the conversation maybe starting? We might just be just dust settling and just getting back to some things that we did it before, but the conversation's going towards what things did we learn in those giant leaps that we can apply to our instructional modalities to hybrid in some ways and strengthen things that were working really good that maybe we couldn't replicate in the classroom. Have those kind of discussions start to occur?
Yeah, and I would say those conversations are already occurring, and I think, and they're occurring in this context of everybody has an idea about what everyone else should be doing, right? So, so there's that like needing to have that space to step back and reflect and say, what would be optimal for us as a unit? And I think that's really, and some of us need to get our legs back on the like, okay, now we're here. But to think about one of the things the faculty brought up during our advance was, with meetings, for example, some meetings could be online. Some meetings could be in email, but some meetings could be online. And how do we make use of that now that we know that we can all be connected in that way, and the sort of that we've leveled up in that the whatever you call it, activation energy to get everybody set up so that we could conference online is now complete. So when can we say, let's just do this meeting online? Because I think one of the things I'm worried about is that the hybrid is really hard to do, the high flex, right? Where you're worried about people online and you got people in the room. And there's always these sort of inequities that come up because are people remembering the people that are online? Are they out of sight, out of mind? How do you keep everybody involved? And yes, there's techniques for that. But is that really what we want to do for default, or do we want to have, I was just talking with with Cindy, if Cindy's here, but with Cindy about that, in that like her workload doubles when she has to set a Zoom call and reserve a room, right? So it's just like at that level, it's like, well, how much, whose work are we duplicating when we do that? Can we think about ways to streamline that or simplify that? So that's just one example of kind of what's our ideal, how do we think about it, what's the ideal for students, what things can they learn best online, what things really do need face-to-face. So, I think about first year, they learned great online teaming skills last year. This year, y'all are here face-to-face, right? And so it's that you probably can't imagine. Well, maybe you can because you had high school, so maybe you do know what it's like to do that online. But it's, but it's that which do you prefer and what are you getting out of each experience, right? And so I think it is a combination, and finding the balance that's going to be right for everybody and equitable, because I think the other thing is when people are remote, that's inevitably when you end up kind of having those challenges about making sure you're including everyone.
I know Merrick has to get to class.
Oh, sorry, please.
But I did want to ask, because we have a lot of first-year engineering faculty in this room, what advice do you have for these first-year engineering students that can pass along to their friends when they go back to class? Any good advice for getting through this year? Could be anything. Any advice you have that you usually give to your students?
Have a calendar. Put everything there. Everything. Time management. Every student that doesn't get an A in first year engineering, most of them is because no time management. So that's my advice.
Sleep is not a bank from which you can draw extra time.
Yep.
Sleep should be non-negotiable.
Yep.
I have to tell myself that.
Last one, anybody? What about any of our income, yeah,
Nice.
New grad student here. Tell us.
Community is important.
Yeah.
Find your tribe and find it early, because most likely they'll be the same people who are going to keep you encouraged and motivated when you feel as though you question why you decided to do what you do. So find your tribe, find it early, and lean on them when it comes to areas where you may be feeling frustrated, but also draw from their strengths in areas where you know or you have grown to know that they could be of help to you. So tribe is very important.
And if you have trouble finding them, don't worry, you'll find them. Like I know I remember like around October my first year there, I have a journal entry to prove it where I'm like, I haven't met the people. I didn't meet them till May, so that probably isn't good. But I did meet them, and it was awesome. Yeah. But like October's like a month in, you know what I mean? Like it's like give yourself a little bit of time, right? Don't feel like you should have met them by now because it's like week 1, right? Just saying. And I would say think about your whole education. That, there's always that pressure to do that next assignment, but you might get more out of going to that cool lecture that's across campus and or playing Ultimate or whatever. Like think about whatever it is that you do. It's all part of your experience at education. That's my advice. Someone might contradict me.
Well, I'm going to say into the mic that thank you for those of you that joined us online. I think that's a wrap as far as our video goes, but we'll those of you can stick around for goodies. Afterwards, we have a few prepackaged things you can grab on your way out, and you can eat in the cafe right outside these doors if you want to. Just kind of social distance without your mask. And put it back on as soon as you're done eating and drinking.